Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.
Welcome back to another edition of Liberty with Love. I am Robin Koerner. Today we are going to be broaching a topic I don't think I've ever broached before, actually, which is kind of damn shameful because it's perhaps the biggest and most important topic that most adults have to deal with in their day-to-day lives, and that is the making of human beings. Today we're going to talk about parenting. Maybe one of the reasons I haven't broached this topic before is because I am not a parent. And one of the reasons I guess I'm not a parent is that I think it's a terrifying thing to do. I think the stakes are so extremely high. And I am very grateful to my mother for, I am biased in saying this, of course, doing such a good job, but I'm not sure I could do the job as well as she did. Is that a little immodest to say? It is, isn't it, really? But anyway, it is what it is. Today, I'm going to be speaking to a parent called Leslie Blanchard, but she's not just any parent. She is a parent that has got quite some following, I think it's fair to say, quite some attention from her thoughts on the making of human beings and marriage, the context in which most people make human beings. I think that's still true these days, although I probably would need to check the data. So, Leslie, welcome to the show. As you know, it was, we were just saying, my friend Paul who sent me one of your articles. And I would like to start with that article because it was a great and important article, and good enough that it prompted me to want to put you on the show to talk about it and talk about parenting more generally. In the article, well, I tell you what, why don't I just throw it over to you and say, please tell my audience what that article was about, and then we'll talk a little bit about the reaction that it got.
Okay. All right. So my name's Leslie Blanchard, and I write a blog that's called A Ginger Snapped. The name of the blog comes from my red hair and fiery temperament, etc. So you can probably figure out the rest. But anyway, I write a blog about marriage and about raising kids. I have 5 kids. My husband and I have 5 children, and we've been married 33 years. So when I decided to start writing, I decided to write what I felt like I knew a little bit about, which was marriage and kids. So mostly what I write is humor. I write about the day-to-day stuff that goes on in my home, just wrecking cars in driveways, wedding planning goes awry.
I guess if you have 5 kids, you have quite a bit of wedding planning to deal with, right?
So, yes. So when you have 5 kids, you have a lot of fodder to write about. I mean, every child brings something different to the mix, and there's always something going on, chaos, usually a lot. So anyway, what I write is humor for the most part. At least I think it's funny. My husband thinks it's funny. And so I started publishing that, and I started publishing different things on Huffington Post and so forth.
When did you start writing? How long ago was it you started writing, Leslie?
That was, okay, so every single year since I've gotten married and had kids, I've always written a Christmas letter.
Okay.
And so obviously it was limited to just my address list. I would send it out to 50 or 100 people every Christmas, and they would always say, oh, you need to write a blog. I read your letter out loud to everybody at my Christmas party or whatever. And so I did eventually start writing a blog. So that was in September of 2014.
Okay.
So every article that I wrote or posted was, I think, in some way funny or humorous, making fun of the, trials and tribulations of marriage and having a big family. But this one day, for whatever reason, I decided to write something serious. And it's about the topic of bullying that's become really, I believe, a widespread epidemic in this country. I don't know if it's everywhere in the world or not. But so I wrote about an incident that I had with my middle child. I've got 3 girls, and my third child is a daughter, and then 2 boys. So I wrote about this middle child who's just a pistol. She's a handful, and a wonderful, wonderful girl and a wonderful person. But she was challenging, and as all strong-willed, I'm sure your mother would agree, all strong-willed people are. So anyway, I wrote about this situation that I had with her where I felt like she could be participating to some degree in not so much bullying, but maybe a precursor to bullying. She was not being inclusive to another little girl at school that obviously liked her a lot.
And how old, just let us know, how old was she, Leslie?
She was, I believe, about 10 at the time. And it just started by her, just exactly the way I started the article. It started by her saying, this girl at Bethany at school is annoying me. And I was, driving home or whatever and said, what do you mean she's annoying you? What is she doing to you? Because as a mother, you always think, well, my poor child, that's your instinct. And so I said, well, whatever is she doing to you to annoy you? And she told me she's following me around on the playground. She's trying to sit with me at lunch, asking me all kinds of questions, engaging me, however, in the vernacular of a 4th grader. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, so you mean she's trying to be your friend? And it just dawned on me like, oh, my gosh, my child is that girl, that's just got her own little clique of friends. And it's a little tick-tock, the game is locked, and there's just really no room for you. And so, I really took her to task on that. We had quite an afternoon. I told her, I'm just not happy with what you're telling me. I want you to try to get to know this girl and be kind to her. And Gracie just dug her heels in on that. And so I said, you need to, and at the time she was going to a private Christian school. So that was even more troubling because the mission statement of the school was, obviously to, carry on in a Christ-like fashion. And so I told her, I'm not going to pay all this tuition money for you to go to this school if you can't embrace what you're there for. So I said, I want you to learn 3 things about this little girl and come back to me tomorrow and report 3 things about this little girl that you didn't know previously that you now know. So I've gotten a lot of flack for this article, in addition to get tons of praise. I mean, I can't complain. I've gotten tons of praise and accolades or what have you from people that were touched by the story, but also a few people who said you shouldn't be forcing your child to be friends with, and that your child should be able to select who their friends are. And I found that very interesting because I never forced her to be friends with the little girl. I forced her to go learn 3 things about the little girl that she didn't know, and that's what she did. It just so happens, and I'm sure it was a little manipulative on my part, that when she learned a few things about the little girl, she realized they had a lot in common and that she had definitely the makings of a beautiful friendship there. So that's what that article was about. But it was interesting when I wrote that article, and the reason I kind of went on and on about how all my past articles are usually funny is because I read my articles in the morning to my husband and just kind of get a kickback off of him. And as I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, like, this really isn't any good. I don't love this. And I was reading his face as well, and he was like, yeah, he didn't love it. And he said, it's okay. When I was done reading it, he said, it's fine. It's a little long, and it's not what I'm used to. I'm used to you being funny. But yeah, sure. And I was like, well, I've already submitted it to the Huffington Post. So I hit the send button, and it's gone. Well, long story, a little shorter, they published it, and it just went wild. I mean, apparently, this is just a topic that touches a lot of people's hearts in one way or another.
Do you think that's because there are many parents reading it that can just remember when their child was in that situation on one end or the other? Is that what it was? Just massive, lots of people relating to it?
Absolutely. Let me tell you, I received thousands of comments because it later went on, as we discussed earlier when we met, it went on to another website and then another website, and it actually ended up ultimately being published. I'm not even sure on how many websites. there's a magazine in Germany that's printing it and publishing it as we speak. So it ran in over 60 countries, and I think somewhere between 15 and 20 translations. But I will tell you that in all of that time, I received thousands of comments and emails from people. One of the oldest people that wrote me was in their 80s and was remembering their own bullying experience as a child. So it wasn't just, people weren't just writing, recalling incidences with their children, although that was the lion's share of it. Most of it was people calling or writing in to tell me that they experienced that with their kids. But a lot of people wrote heartbreaking recollections of this occurring to them in their own childhood, and the scars that came from that.
Thank you, Leslie.
So it's long lasting.
Yeah, absolutely. This does touch the memories of many people. I know I was bullied at school, so I can get it. We're going into the first break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. This is Liberty with Love with Robin Koerner. I'm talking to Leslie Blanchard about this article that she wrote about an incident involving her daughter that got a lot of attention. Leslie, do you think one of the reasons that this article got so much attention was because of kind of the inspired way, perhaps, in which you dealt with the situation with your daughter, what you asked your daughter to do in going to find out 3 things about this other young girl at school who she was actually not very interested in?
I do. I think that the article might have been a little unique in that you can certainly read a lot that's written by parents from the perspective of their child being bullied. But I think it just occurred to me through the years, every time, one of my children was on the, wrong side of it or the, hurting side of that there's parents out there that don't have any idea their children are being mean. And of course, by logical extension, I thought I'm certainly probably one of them. I've got 5 kids. These statistics are probably against me. The odds are against me a little bit. So I was just kind of keen, aware of that and just keen to that. And nice people are out there raising bullies. People who are good-hearted parents that are well-intentioned parents that are trying to create wonderful human beings are not always aware of their children's inclinations or their behavior because you can't be there every second, And so when she told me that story, flags were going off. I was sensing that in this particular case, she wasn't being kind. And I feel very strongly that people, when they're unkind to other people, they're probably fighting their way through their own insecurities. And that's what I really wanted to address with my daughter. I knew that she had her own insecurities because we all do. And a lot of our persona is sort of developed around our own insecurities. And so that's, I just wanted to get to the heart of the matter. And I think maybe in this particular article, it resonated with so many people because it was just a different perspective. It was coming from the perspective of the parent who's just driving home, driving their child home from school in a carpool type situation, who hears something and is thinking, okay, this is my opportunity to make a difference. This is my opportunity to try to reach out and appeal to the better nature of my own child to maybe help this other child. So I know you're familiar with the article, but I not only did I challenge my daughter, I called the other mother.
Yes, that was very
verify.
interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to verify if my instincts were correct because I guess it's possible that this other child, didn't really care that much. But of course, that's not what I found out. My instincts were spot on. The little girl, the mother told me her daughter was just crazy about my daughter and talked about her all the time and said, it even made a joke and said, sometimes at dinner, Bethany will bring up Gracie, apropos to nothing and talk about her. And, that hurt. That hurt me to hear because that's what I suspected was that this child liked my daughter and my daughter wasn't paying any attention back. And so I felt like it needed to be dealt with.
Do you experience yourself as a very unusual parent, because that level of, well, dare I say, kindness on your part, let alone engagement, by involving that other parent, is something that I think a lot of parents caught up in their own ego really just wouldn't do, right? They don't want to even admit that their kid could be close to having that kind of a problem, could be close to doing something that isn't kind. Do you experience your parenting style as kind of out there relative to the parents in your community, maybe that you speak to?
Yes and no. I mean, absolutely at times. And I've talked to my kids about it because we've talked about the way that they were raised and sort of the, I guess, the emphasis that I placed on trying to get into the hearts of other people and understand what other people were going through. And when I've put a little pressure on my children in that area, they've told me, everybody isn't, every other parent isn't necessarily doing this. My friends' parents aren't necessarily telling them that they have to go out of their way and this and that. Obviously, a lot of parents are out there doing that. And certainly anybody who's ever had a hurting child has experienced it from that angle, is trying to build compassion and empathy in their children. But there's a lot of people that aren't, for whatever reason. They've had it, their child's been good to go, and they haven't had to experience that suffering or that kind of pain. And so maybe they're not as intuitively aware of it. But yeah, my kids have begrudgingly commented many times that, you're raising us a little different. They all just want to have an easier road.
As they've got older, do they begrudge it less, though? Do they see the value of what you've given them?
Absolutely. They do. And they know. I tell them all the time, I do a lot of things with my life. I'm a writer. Your dad has his career. And we, all the parents that have something going on. And maybe you kids think that that's our number one thing, but our number one thing is you. I mean, raising you to be a wonderful human being. When I'm gone from this earth, my life isn't going to be my life as a writer. It's going to be my life as a mother. You're my legacy. And I tell them all the time, I take that very seriously. I want to leave this world a little bit better than I found it, and I plan to do it through you, like it or not. And they don't always like it, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, no pressure, but ... No
pressure, but ... You're my legacy.
Do you think there is more or less bullying now than maybe when you were a child? Or do you think it's impossible to answer that question, but maybe the form of bullying or the predominant form of bullying has changed?
Gosh, Robin, my husband Jim and I have talked about that ad nauseum. We just have talked to one another over and over again about that. His experiences as a kid, mine, I was an Army brat. And to, make matters worse, I was redheaded and freckle-faced, and I had you could check almost every box. And certainly I received a little bullying as a kid. There was always that. And then, of course, there's all these different textures and layers of bullying. In this case that I wrote this article about, my daughter wasn't overtly saying anything unkind or ugly to this child. She was dismissive. Dismissive, just uninclusive, disinterested. But I think sometimes that's where bullying really starts. Honestly, obviously bullying has always existed. You can go back in literature and you can see evidence of it through the years. So that part of human nature that is given to that has been with us always. But then to the second part of your question, certainly the vehicles within which we can bully people now. Yes, I mean, absolutely. No one can deny social media, cyberbullying is a thing. And I think it's just taken something that maybe existed all along, this tendency to maybe bully another human being, someone who's perhaps more vulnerable, more socially vulnerable than ourselves. It's given us an avenue. It's just easier now with social media. It's easier to say things by text or on Facebook or on Snapchat or Instagram or Twitter It's easier to be mean when you're not face to face with a person.
Let's talk some more about that, because we've got a break coming up in about half a minute, but it's just something that I've been thinking about with respect to myself, actually. I'm Generation X, and a lot of the folks I deal with, a lot of the folks I have in my life are millennials. And for me, I need a reason to put to broadcast something about my life on social media. And I'm not going to do it because to me it's essentially narcissistic if I don't have a good reason. But for the generation below me, that's just how you communicate with your friends. And so I think that makes the social landscape, and as you say, therefore the vehicles for bullying and the meaning of ostracization and isolation kind of different in this generation from maybe my generation or maybe your generation. So let's talk about that the other side of this break. This is Liberty with Love. I'm Robin Koerner. Thank you for being with me. We'll be back in a few minutes. This is Liberty with Love. I'm Robin Koerner, and I'm having a very interesting conversation with Leslie Blanchard here. So Leslie, I just can't get over social media. On my political team, I have a little team of people that support my work, like Paul, who originally got in touch with you for this show, and they're telling me always that I need to be putting out more social media content. Robin, if you have an idea, stick it on a video, stick it on Facebook, and I will do it because I have to do it because that's the world I live in now. But I am my mother's son, and I hate it. I hate having to just display or even the expectation that I'm going to display, in quotes, bits of my life, things that are in my head, because the doing of it implies that you're saying to the world, I've got something so valuable, you really must all take 2 minutes out of your day to listen to it or to see it or whatever it might be. And so maybe I'm a little bit of a reactionary in this respect. As I say, I'm my mother's son, but my mother wouldn't even be able to get onto Facebook, let alone post something on Facebook, and never would she want to. And good on her, I say. But what is it like to be a parent in an age where I imagine your young children's emotions are heightened, their reactions are heightened by the fact that the things they do in their life are generally also things that are displayed, right, through social media. Or maybe if they're not displayed, that itself is kind of an unusual decision, right? If you're a kid that isn't present in the media that the social media that maybe all the other kids are, that right there sets you apart. So this kind of lack of privacy, this expectation that your friends get to see everything, and more importantly, that you have to share everything with your friends. What does that do to parenting?
Well, boy, that's just broad. I'm glad we've got a lot of time. We have,
this is a long segment, and I'm going to kick back and just take it wherever you want to.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so with my first two daughters, my husband and I have been married 33 years. I think I said there's actually a gap in between our two oldest children and our three youngest children. So there's 7 years in between our second daughter and our third daughter. So we have what we call the bigs and the littles. Although the bigs are our two oldest are actually physically littler. We started calling them the bigs and the littles when they were little. And anyway, so we've got Emily and Molly, and they're 30 and 27. And I'm making this point because my next oldest child is Gracie, who's 21, and the little girl this article was written about. It's almost like I've had the opportunity to raise two different families. And, I'm emphasizing that because it's kind of given me this interesting perspective. My two oldest daughters really did not grow up with all of the pressure of social media. At 30 and 27, I believe I kind of remember when they both asked me if they could get Facebook accounts, and they were in high school. But let's face it, by the time your child is in high school, their character's developed.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I've ever really read any hard studies on this, but I think it's safe to say that if you haven't shaped and molded and influenced your child's character by the time they're 13 or 14, you're probably not going to.
I'm reminded of the famous bishop's quote, "Give me the boy till he's 7 and I'll give you the man."
Exactly. So, So those two girls got Facebook accounts when they were teenagers, and I don't recall there ever being too many incidences or any real problems. And they're both attorneys now, and very, very guarded, and have a lot of professional boundaries with respect to what they do and don't post. Maybe a picture of the family at Christmas or something like that, but it's pretty private. In fact, if anything, it's been a kind of a twist, because they've actually called and scolded me.
I can imagine. Telling these stories.
It's almost like the opposite of what you have in a family. It's like, I've got to get my mom off of the screen. I've got to talk to mom. But anyway, okay, so then moving on to the littles, that's Gracie, James, and Tommy, who are now 21, 19, and 16. Whole different story. I mean, just parenting from such a new perspective, it's almost as if I had never parented before. So with Gracie, it started in about the third or fourth grade, when Instagram and Facebook and all of those those social media started becoming really popular, I guess Twitter, that little girls would say, they would post something to the effect of, we're all over here at Panera having lunch, and then maybe do a little picture of the 4 or 5 of them, and my daughter would read it in real time, and she's not there, and panic and get upset, because, I mean, when I was in school, if you maybe didn't get invited to a party on Friday night or something, you didn't find out about it till you were standing at your locker on Monday.
Right.
And by then it was in the past.
Right.
So really consider what parents are up against now when their child can find out that they're being left out of something that's actually occurring right this minute in real time. It's not something that happened a couple nights ago. It's, we're doing this right now and you're not here.
Now, dealing with that as a parent, is it like dealing with, a corresponding situation when you have more time, when it's I guess what I'm saying is it quantitatively different, or is it qualitatively different from dealing with similar things in a preceding generation? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was qualitatively different. I mean, I had to dig deep to work through a hurt like that. I mean, that was that really required a lot. I mean, it's one thing to talk to your child about something that had a couple days, had happened maybe a couple of days hence, and now you're moving forward, and every day's a new day, and we're moving forward. But your child can now today be socially ostracized and know about it while it's happening on social media.
Does that mean as a parent you have to make your child thicker skinned faster?
Yes, and so therein lies the conundrum, because how do you make your child thicker skinned so that they're less sensitive to their own perceived hurts, and yet still raise a human being that is sensitive to their potential to hurt others?
What a beautiful question. I want to hear your answer to that.
Oh, of course you do. I want to hear my answer to that. It's just that. It's a parenting conundrum, because to the degree that you're sensitive for yourself, my kids who are the most sensitive, the couple of my children that get their feelings hurt the quickest and the easiest, are also correlatively sensitive to any time that they hurt another.
Yes.
And then I've got a couple who probably let a lot more roll off their shoulder. They're just not as hypersensitive, not as socially acute perhaps, but they may not be quite as aware, because to the degree that they're easygoing, they're just assuming other people are. So yeah, I think it's very difficult to raise people that are aware of. I think maybe in some ways I might have made my kids sensitive in a bad way when I was trying to make them sensitive in a good way, because they are sensitive to other people, but then that sort of raised their antenna to know when maybe they were being mistreated. So the daughter that I coerced to go and put herself out there and try to get to know this other girl, where her expectations are that there'll be some reciprocity there, that other parents will be out there. And we kind of touched on that in the earlier segment, that other parents will be out there requiring the same standard, holding the bar just as high.
Did that make your daughter then more judgmental in a way? And if so, was that a bad thing?
Not so much judgmental, just aware. And then there's been a lot of talking with me and all of my children about, who we are and what our standard is, and that we're not gonna lower our standard based on what everyone else is doing. We're gonna try to always do what we know to be the right thing, regardless of what anyone else is doing. So, maybe just a little bit more acute. Hopefully, not judgmental in a bad way, but just aware.
I mean, I guess it gets to, does it not, the need to inculcate in your children, perhaps sooner than maybe in previous generations, the idea that we ultimately are all responsible for our own emotions, that we get to choose how we react. And maybe we only had to make big choices regarding how we react when we were 13, 14, 15 in my generation. And now maybe kids are having to come to that maybe as soon as they're on social media, let's say, which I'm sure is a lot younger than that. Is that the philosopher's stone of this, getting kids to realize that, you get to choose your reaction, and then to strengthen them spiritually to be able to do that?
Absolutely. And one of the things that, as we started, through my experience parenting, through this journey with trying to understand the impact of social media, I sort of developed along the way. I'm not entirely sure if it came to me in one day in an epiphany or just, gradually, but I started using this example of hitting the pause button with my kids. Like, you do not need to respond immediately. There's no statute of limitations on anger or on your response. You need to hit the pause and just don't do anything or say anything for, 24 hours, and let's see how you feel. Because a huge part of the problem that's going on with these kids with their cell phones and so forth is they're through texting, they're responding right away in a way that they can't take back. It's irrevocable. And so that may be the difference between my childhood and maybe even your childhood, is that, you could say something because you were speaking it. It was audible, but only to people who were within earshot of you. There was no record of it, or, nothing was following you around. But now with texting, well, I remember the first time. And
it's even worse than texting, isn't it? Because if you text a friend, that's one thing, but you stick a message on a status update on Facebook, all of your friends have seen it at that point.
Well, exactly. And then I remember the first time one of my daughters said something about a screenshot. And I said, "What's a screenshot?" And she was telling me a story about two little girls that had gotten in a tiff, and one of them had screenshots of the conversation. I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about until she showed me. And I was like, oh my gosh. So not only are these kids texting one another, and then there's more license and more freedom to say what you want to say because you're not really having to stand there and face to face with someone. But in addition to that, they're taking a picture of the conversation on their phone and sending it to other people, or even posting that on social media. Yeah. So, I mean, navigating this it's just considerably harder, and it's been considerably harder with my younger kids than it was with my older kids, because there's so much accountability now for what you say, that it's very important to stress to our kids that, they can't take a lot of that stuff back. They've got to really consider their emotions. And, I definitely encourage my kids to talk to me if they're confused about a situation. A lot of times my kids will bring me a situation and I say, I think you're reading this wrong. And I think maybe that this is what's going on here. And then I'll often encourage them to go talk to that person face to face, or even just at the very least make a phone call and hear their voice so that they can understand tone and tenor and inflection and really understand what this person might be saying. Because when your kid responds by text or something on Facebook, it's just, it's there for, like you said, everyone to see.
Yeah, that's right. Parents definitely have to provide a space that their children can stand back and assess the different media and the different effects the different media can have. Because obviously, most of the time they're caught up in social media and the texting, as you say. And maybe unless somebody points out to them, look, you're going to have a different impact on a Facebook post, on a text, in a phone call, in an email, face to face. That, I guess, with all of these media at the disposal of our kids these days, that's something that needs to be taught, is massively important in a way that I don't think it did need to be taught to my generation. We've only got a minute and a half left in this segment. It goes so fast when the conversation is as interesting as this one is. And I'm going to throw something huge out for just a minute, which is... that here we are talking about the need for kids to learn that they get to be responsible for their reactions and their emotions. And yet it seems to me, as a Gen Xer, that we're living in a society where certainly students at universities think it's okay to shut people down for saying things that make them feel bad. In other words, doing the opposite of taking responsibility for their emotions. And so instead of controlling their emotions, because they fail to do that, they want to start controlling people. How do you deal with that? I mean, that's just, I can't bear it. This is kind of the PC gone crazy thing. This is the social justice warrior thing. But we're also, kids are seeing this as well. And we've only got a minute left in this segment, but we'll have a minute when we come back.
I absolutely agree. And it's something I actually just talked to my son about yesterday. He's a college freshman. And I said, what an exciting time to be a college freshman. I mean, there's so much going on in the country and in the world, and you're right there on a campus, university campus where you're experiencing it all. But yeah, there's a right and a wrong way to express everything that you're feeling. And I think that perhaps a lot of the kids you're talking about just feel so strongly what they feel that they're missing the opportunity to respect the voice of another.
Yeah, very well said. So we're going into the final break. This is Liberty with Love. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, Leslie. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. In 2011, Robin Koerner wrote the article that launched the biggest coalition for Ron Paul's presidential run, called Blue Republican. Now, Stairway Press is pleased to announce the publication of his first book, If You Can Keep It, Why We Nearly Lost It and How We Get It Back. Jeffrey Tucker, who wrote the foreword, says brilliant ideas come in effervescent packages. This is a good description of Robin Koerner's provocative work. It's a work of stunning erudition and sincerity. I also happen to agree with it. I've been struggling toward a similar thesis for a good part of my writing career, though I'm certain Robin has gone beyond even my most mature thought. His section on liberty as a realization of a civilization of love truly sweeps me away with its insight and depth. I know that time is short and that people don't read as carefully as they should, but this section deserves close study by every advocate of liberty. It will change the way you think and speak about the topic. We need this book now. Pre-order your personally signed copy of If You Can Keep It at ifyoucankeepit.us. So, Leslie, as we close out this show, and in the spirit of the end of the last segment, do you feel that if your kid gets to university and they're screaming and setting things alight because they don't like what they know the speaker who's been invited to the campus is about to say, and that they start equating communication with actual physical aggression as some kind of justification for that kind of behavior, would you say that probably indicates bad parenting?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say that, but yes, I would be appalled if my children disrespected anybody in that way. And I just try to remind them all the time how much changing goes on through your maturation process. And I mean, through your 20s and into your 30s. I mean, I am just not the same person today that I was 10 years ago. But I'm closer to the same person today than I was 10 years ago than they are today to the person they were 10 years ago. Yeah. Because, we change. We're always changing and evolving and growing, hopefully, but never more so than when you're young.
Absolutely.
They're just changing all the time. And so, yes, I want them to respect other people because their perspectives may change and shift as they get older and have different life experiences, such as being married, being a parent, holding down a full-time job. I mean, a lot of these kids have never really ever even worked. So I'm not trying to say that their feelings aren't legitimate, but their feelings are inclined to change with time and perspective. So, yeah, I would be real upset if my kids couldn't be aware of that and conduct themselves in a way that respects that awareness.
It's beautifully said. I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes by one of my favorite authors. There's something I do not know, the knowing of which could change everything. And with that, we have literally just half a minute here. So please, Leslie, this has been a real pleasure. I'm so glad I got to quote meet you, unquote, online like this. But please throw out your URL there. If people want to see, find out about you, your family, and read some of your blog posts, where can they go?
Yes, they can go to agingersnap.com. They can just type a ginger snapped into their browser. Leslie Blanchard, find me on Facebook. I'll connect with you. Find me on Twitter. Absolutely. I would love to reach out.
Thank you, Leslie. Thanks so much for your time, and thank you for being with me on Liberty with Love.
Thank you.
Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.
If you appreciated this episode of Liberty with Love with Robin Koerner, then please go ahead and like it, subscribe to my channel, and maybe check out one of the other episodes like this one here.